Before we begin, a huge shout out to Andrew, first Incubi level Patreon to the channel. Hello and welcome to another unit by unit video. Today, the first of the heavy support choices, we take a look at the terrifying Talos.
The Dark Kin.
Hello and welcome to another unit by unit video here on SkaredCast. I am Skari, your grateful host. Today we continue the look at the new Drukhari Codex because I am a fan, and we dive into the first of the heavy support choices, the mighty Talos that has been ripping up a swathe through enemy armies over the last summer. So, if you have not watched one of these videos before, I talk about the lore of the Talos themselves and what their role is in Drukhari, Dark Eldar society, and then look at their rules and how to best use them in game. For more advanced, in-depth tactical videos, check out the Patreon link down below and join the growing Denizen community if you'd like some cool exclusive tactical content and coaching as well. So let's dive right into the mighty Talos. I will say, I've been a huge fan of Talos ever since the Index. You know, I ran them every once in a while. And then this book came out and it made them absolutely beautiful. So we'll see how they survive chapter approved to date this video. You don't know which chapter approved. However, the Talos themselves, beautiful, gorgeous models. Now, of course, I read a bit of the fluff out of the Drukhari book, so make sure that you purchase the book and read it for yourself if you like the full story and backstory and outline. The Talos. The engines of pain, of which the Talos is the most widespread, are seen as the pinnacle of the homunculi's art. Creations of mad genius, each one is part organic and part mechanical, festooned with surgical apparatus and horrible-looking weapons of war. Though they vary greatly in construction, each Talos is always well-equipped to visit hideous retribution upon those that earn their master's ire. These semi-sentient constructs drift along with menacing slowness, the whine of their anti-gravitic motors to counterpoint to the flicker-clack of silvered blades as they close with their prey. The Talos performs several roles in the obliterates of the homunculi, for it is both a guard creature and a mobile torture chamber that can inflict a dizzying variety of agonies upon those it catches in its steely grasp. A Talos is valuable to the homunculi not only as a shield, its metal shell and twisted mind make it all but impervious to harm, but also as a tool, for it allows its master to punish the slow and impudent without lifting a crooked finger. Additionally, the creature bears ranged armaments on his scorpion-like tail, but its manipulators and scalpel-keen claws that hang underneath a Talos' segmented carapace that are truly to be feared. When a Talos catches an enemy warrior, it holds them tight with a pair of grasping steel limbs and begins a rapid and efficient disassembly of its victim with the rest. It strips and renders down the physical form of its prey layer by layer until nothing is left but a few drops of blood. In battle, this gruesome process is immensely pleasing to the homunculus owner, for not only does it provide an entertaining spectacle, but it also affords the Talos even greater motive power as it harnesses and consumes its fleshy bounty. When it catches its next quarry, the process begins anew, but the fate of one caught by a Talos does not end in death. Upon the engine's return to its coven's obliterates, the constituent parts of its victims will be siphoned out from within its metal shell and used to create yet more potions and elixirs. Flesh collectors. When homunculi send their Talos engines to accompany a raid in real space, the monstrous servants are often tasked with collecting specific samples for their masters. Typically, this involves devouring certain types of creatures from a planet's populace, or subsuming a specific individual, such as a planetary governor. However, at times the demand of the homunculi are far more nuanced. When raiding in Tau space, the Talos known as Marrow Giver, love that name, was once instructed to consume only those fire warriors who had witnessed the rest of their strike team slaughtered before them. Failure to complete such a task, or worse still, deviation from these instructions, inevitably sees the Talos dismantled and discarded. To outside eyes, such stringency may seem wasteful, but in their craft the homunculi require absolute precision. Different types of harvested material carry different properties, each of which has a unique purpose. That's not everything, but Taloses are one of the coolest, most iconic aspects of the coven of the Drukhari culture. And as you can tell, just the way that a homunculus would use a Talos as a sort of gatherer to get ingredients amuses me to no end. So in the fluff, they're terror incarnate, they're hard to kill. The homunculus give them certain tasks. If you ever read the Andy Chambers book, Path of the Path of the Dark Eldar, the 3 books, there's a pair, a Talos and a Kronos, essentially, that have been tasked by homunculus to go and hunt out a specific person in the Dark City, and so they basically use the genetic material of said individual to hunt them down, which is pretty cool. So they're like assassins, and they'll render you down to your constituent parts, and the homunculus will drain the vials and make a soup. And it's really really entertaining from a Drukhari perspective. Maybe I've been living in the Spire for too long. Okay, but let's talk about the unit in book. So, 1 Talos is 6 power level. You can add up to 2 additional Talos to the unit for 6 power level each. They're around 100 points or so. So make sure you check your chapter approved and codex to find out what point level they are. But a Talos has an 8-inch movement. They are weapon skill 3, ballistic skill 4. They are strength and toughness 6. They have 7 wounds, 5 attacks. They are leadership 8 and have a 3+ armor save. Pretty standard. Each model is equipped with 2 Splinter Cannons and 2 macro Scalpels as a base. So, as it stands at tough, it has 7 wounds, which means that it's an odd number, which means 2 damage and 3 damage weapons and 6 damage weapons will have a harder time knocking out the Talos efficiently, because they'll end up soaking more wounds than needed, really, to get them killed. So they're relatively tough just on that aspect. That's a lot of mathematics involved, but 7 wounds is a good thing. Toughness 6, strength 6, they hit well in combat, they shoot okay, 4 up to save, and to shoot, and they have an 8-inch move. But let's take a look at their war gear options. This is where the Talos really come to shine. Standard is a Splinter Cannon, which is a 36-inch rapid-fire 3 poison weapon, wounds on 4s. So they have 2 of those. That means they have 12 shots at 18 inches or 6 shots at 36 inches. It's not a terrible weapon choice if you're going up against a lot of like monstrous creatures in your area, etc. And 2 macro scalpels. The macro scalpel is the basic Talos weapon. It's a melee weapon that's strength +1, making the Talos strength 7. It is -2 AP and 2 damage. So they have 5 attacks at strength 7, hitting on 3s, -2 AP, 2 damage. So even then, that's pretty snazzy. When it's equipped with 2 macro scalpels, they make 1 additional attack. So that's 6 attacks with macro scalpels at strength 7, 2 damage, -2 AP. So in combat, can do a bit of damage even against multi-wounded monsters or even vehicles being strength 7, which is pretty cool. As for war gear options, any Talos may replace one of its macro scalpels with an Ikura Injector or a liquefy gun. So a twin liquefy gun. The liquefy gun is an 8-inch flamer. It's 2d6 shots. It's strength 3, -d3 AP, 1 damage. And that's it. It automatically hits its target. Now, I love liquefy guns as a concept. I don't like how expensive they are in points. So I find that they're not as efficient as they could be. You're giving up a whole attack for a strength 3 flamer. Not really that useful. If you're going to use flamers, I recommend the Kronos, which we'll talk about in the next video. And then the Ikura Injector, which is a melee weapon at strength user, -1 AP, which is okay. It's 1 damage. You can only make a single attack with this weapon. You can reroll failed wound rolls, but every time you roll a 6 to wound, it suffers D3 mortal wounds. The target suffers D3 mortal wounds. So it's like basically a little poison injector, the same weapon that Urian Rakarth has in his. Now, Talos pair really well with Urian Rakarth, so make sure you check the link down below for the Urian Rakarth video if you want to learn how to combine them and how to get the most out of your Talos units. But I don't like the Ikura Injector just because it's 1 attack. Any Talos may replace one of its macro scalpels with chain flails or a Talos gauntlet. So, a Talos gauntlet is essentially a power fist. It's +2 strength instead of +1 strength, -3 AP and D3 damage, but you subtract -1 to hit. Which isn't terrible, makes them strength 8 to start. If you have Urian nearby, it can be strength 9. It's D3 damage instead of straight 2, and it's -3 AP, which is better in general. It is a relatively expensive weapon, but it competes with something called the Chain Flail. The Chain Flail is by far one of my favorite weapons to give a Talos. It is amazing. And you'll see why. It's a melee weapon at strength user with 0 AP and 1 damage. So at first glance, doesn't look like much, does it? Until you read its abilities. The Chain Flail rolls 2 hit rolls for each attack, and you can reroll failed to wound rolls with this weapon. So all of a sudden, you change 1 macro scalpel for a Chain Flail, which is cheaper than a macro scalpel, at least right now when I'm reading this. And you get 10 attacks with your Talos at strength 6 that reroll wounds. So you're getting all these attacks with chain flails, which makes the Talos really good at clearing out hordes, but also putting a lot of wounds on the enemy. I'm a huge proponent of forcing your opponent to roll as many dice as possible, because luck is luck. That's why I like Venom Blades on my Archons. Wounding on 2s means you're putting more saves on the enemy. And this forces them to roll good or to lose their models. So 10 attacks from a Talos, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, re-rolling. It's like having Doom built into your Talos, which is pretty cool. and makes them great at clearing out hordes of infantry, especially that screens are so prevalent and important. They can run into a screen, and a unit of 3 Talos with 30 attacks can do some crazy amounts of damage. So that's always to keep in mind. Now also you can always switch and do the macro Scalpels and do the higher strength AP damage 2 attacks to take on things like knights and tougher targets. This makes Talos one of the most versatile units in the Drukhari arsenal. So let me know how you like to equip your Talos and leave a comment down below. Any Talos may replace its 2 Splinter Cannons with either a Stinger Pod, 2 Heat Lancers, or 2 Haywire Blasters. So not only can you equip the close combat variety of the Talos, you can also tailor its scorpion-like tail to whatever tools you need at the time. Splinter Cannons we discussed. A Stinger Pod is an assault 24-inch, 2d6 strength 5 shots. That's it. It's the cheapest of the weapons. It means you can advance and still shoot with it and fire and fade if you need to. It basically has the potential of doing 12 shots like the Splinter Cannon, but it's strength 5, which means that you'll be wounding chaff a lot easier than a Splinter Cannon would. I prefer those if you're using them in an anti-infantry role. But the Heat Lance can also be useful. It's strength 6, 18 inches, d6 damage, -5 AP, and does double, like 2 dice damage. Pick the highest within 9 inches. Not really the best weapon against anti-tank, but if you're going for one of the obsessions that allows you to snipe characters, for example, that can be a nasty proposition for your opponent when your Talos snipe out their character from amongst their screens, especially with strength 6 weapons, and you get 2 Heat Lances on each one, so that could be up to 6 Heat Lance shots on a character for a couple of CPs, which is pretty cool. My favorite is the Haywire Blaster. The Haywire Blaster happens to be one of the most versatile choices, and with a versatile unit, a versatile choice comes best. The Haywire Blaster is great against tanks, doing mortal wounds on a 4+, when you roll to wound. But it's a 24-inch range, assault D3 weapon that's strength 4, -1 AP, 1 damage. If you roll a wound of a 4+ for this weapon, the target suffers a mortal wound in addition to any other damage. If the wound is a 6+, it inflicts D3 mortal wounds instead of 1. So against vehicles, very dangerous with the Haywire. But strength 4, -1 AP, means that it's almost just as good against infantry. You get D3 shots, so that's 2 D3 shots per Talos if you run a pair of Haywire Blasters, and all of a sudden you're looking at a Talos that can deal with both light infantry and tanks together with their macro Scalpel and their chain flail. It's probably the most versatile unit choice in the Codex. Yes, it's relatively slow with the 8-inch movement, but they're so tough that they don't have to worry about getting anywhere too quickly. So that's it for war gear options. So go nuts. Really practice, test things out. The reason I'm so confident is because I've been using Talos in my list. I run 4 to 6 of them in most of my competitive lists. So I have a lot of practice using Talos. And if you haven't tried them already, I highly recommend you do. Their abilities as Drukhari. They have the Power from Pain rule, which means that on turn 1, they get a 6-up Feel No Pain, in addition to being really tough. On turn 2, they can reroll advance and charge rolls, making them very efficient at getting into combat. On turn 3, they get +1 to hit in combat. That means they hit on 2s, which is crazy. On turn 4, they become fearless, not something you're going to see very often come up. And on turn 5, it's a 6-inch -1 leadership to the enemy bubble around them, which is hit or miss. The biggest ones they're going to use are the first 3, turn 1, turn 2, and turn 3. They also have Insensible to Pain. Models in this unit have a 5+ invulnerable save. Great, so let's get this straight. We're looking at a toughness 6 or 7 near a homunculus, 3+ armor save, 5+ invulnerable save, 7 wounds, 6-up Feel No Pain. What else can you ask for? Oh wait, yes, you can make them Prophets of Flesh, and then make this rule a 4+ invulnerable save. Breaking the internet right there. Last but not least, a Talos does explode if it dies. Roll a d6 before removing the model. On a 6, every unit within 6 inches suffers a mortal wound. It's quite a big explosion. Boom, I've had my Talos explode on a few occasions, so keep that in mind, as it will kill some things sometimes. Their faction keywords: Eldari, Drukhari, Homunculus, Coven, so you can make them any obsession you want. And they have the keywords monster, Talos. And then in the FAQ, they added fly. That's right, so in the movement phase, they can move over units and terrain as if it was not there, which makes them very maneuverable to get around. So my favorite use of a Talos is essentially as a counter-strike unit. I usually use grotesques to screen the main force of the army and have a couple of units of Talos hiding back. They can jump over with their fly and then get stuck into where they want to go. I always like keeping them nearby Uri and Rakarth. That gives them +1 leadership, strength, and toughness, and running them as a Prophets of Flesh detachment for the +1 to their invulnerable save. Talos are very strong, they're very tough, and they're decently priced as well. However, you should really watch out for things like mortal wounds. They go straight through your invulnerable saves and your toughness and hit you right where it hurts in your wounds. And unless you can roll lots of 6-ups, they're going to die a lot faster than you think. Death Hex is another power, or Null Zone, that you have to really be careful of, because once that invulnerable save is gone, they become a lot more vulnerable to enemy attacks. Other than that, don't be shy to use your Talos aggressively, but don't just run them up unsupported. Talos work best as a mop-up unit that can really do a hammer blow, but you have to set it up. If you just send them out on their own, they will die. Well, that's all I have for the Talos. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Make sure you click that little subscribe and notification button, as I put videos up every week. And it'd be really cool to see you over on the Denizen page by becoming a Patreon. If you'd like some more exclusive content, check the link for that down below. I'm Skari, your grateful host, signing off until next time from here at the Spire. Skari out.